This conference will now be recorded.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us this morning for our Rise and Shine Economic Development Speaker Series. We want to welcome our speaker today, Gordon Stone. He's the Executive Director for the Alabama Education Partnership, and thanks to Brett Johnson for connecting us. Brett's in our leadership class this year and recommended Mr. Stone. Just to give you a little bit of background on what the Alabama Education Partnership is, it's an advocacy organization representing students, faculty, staff, alumni, and other supporters of Alabama's 4-year public universities. The main areas of focus are creating a politically informed network of supporters, communicating the true picture of the outstanding performance of Alabama's universities, and creating coalitions with Alabama's business and education communities. So we're excited to hear from Mr. Stone, and we're going to turn the floor over to him.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Heather. It's great to have the opportunity to visit with you all today. I hope everybody can hear me. If you can, somebody give me a thumbs up to make sure we've got good sound. Great. Well, it's one of the great gifts of being in a job like mine is the opportunity to meet with people and discuss issues that we think are very important and hear back from you and gather feedback and learn collectively and collaboratively. But it's also fun to travel around and get to know the state and find out about things that you may not have known were happening. Unfortunately, in the era that we're currently in, the last 7 months, we have had less opportunity to travel and visit and get to know the areas, but we still, through technology, are getting to know the people. So thank you for joining in, and I hope that you will find what we have to talk about interesting. Hopefully it'll be enlightening, and in the end, maybe it'll be motivational and encourage you to take some action steps, because that's really what we would love to be able to do. So the Higher Education Partnership is an organization that was formed in 1997. So now we're almost a quarter of a century old, and we were established because in the state of Alabama, we had a lot of groups and entities that worked in advocacy roles for K through 12, but we didn't really have any unifying voice for Alabama's public universities. Now, if you think about the state of Alabama, we are fortunate to have great public universities. We don't have a dominant, large private 4-year institution. We have some great private institutions. I mean, no disrespect to the Birmingham Southerns and the Sanfords and the other private institutions of our state, but we just don't have that big, large scale private institution that would be more prominently known across the horizon, say a Vanderbilt or a Tulane or that type of entity. So we have a heavier dependence in our state on 4-year public education, and that has created a rather unique model for 4-year institutions in Alabama. Each of our 14, and we have 14 geographically placed, to what you might call traditional statewide or flagship institutions, University of Alabama and Auburn being the land grant institution. But the state has 14 public 4-year degree providers, and each of these has its own governance, which is a unique way of establishing that opportunity for our people and our young people particularly to gain access to the education that prepares them to prepare them for the jobs that are out there in the marketplace. So with that dynamic, there's a heavier dependence on public policy as it relates to education. And we all know that public policy influences K through 12. And if you followed that over the course of the last decade, you know that it's really no longer K through 12, it's pre-K through 12 now. And so when you think about that, everybody knows that you've got a local school board and you've got state legislators and state policy and state school board, and you think about all the entities that go into making a K through 12 system operate. And so you think about, well, I need to be able to have a voice to influence what happens there. Well, at the 4-year level, what you have is really because each one has its individual board of trustees, there's not been that much statewide awareness of the need for advocacy as it relates to policy for that part of our educational model. So one of the things that we advocate, and one of the first points I'd like to make with you, is that for a state to be its maximum in its abilities to reach its economic potential, for a state to do the things that it wants to do in quality of life, for a state to have, and let me define quality of life: healthcare, cultural arts, even infrastructure that allows for you to move around easily. For a state to have all of that, it really must have a vibrant and successful pre-K through PhD educational offering. And that's so the partnership was formed to provide that voice for Alabama's public university students, faculty, staff, administrators, and even alumni to come together and remind our policymakers of the importance of that last part of our educational pathway, and that is that four-year degree component. And as we know, that can also mean a master's and even a professional degree. So how much do universities mean to your state? A second point I'd like to make for you is give you just a number to think about: 20 billion. 20 billion. That's the economic impact on an annual basis of Alabama's four-year public universities. Now, that's not a number that is based on a lot of subsidiary input. That is the actual generated economic impact of the institutions, their auxiliaries, their professional schools, all the things that go with our public universities. People don't think about that, but I would challenge you to think about what these counties would look like if we didn't have our universities. Think about Jefferson County without UAB. Think about Mobile County without the University of South Alabama. Think about Tuscaloosa and that corridor between Birmingham and the Mississippi line without the University of Alabama, and from Montgomery to Auburn all the way to Atlanta with the I-85 corridor without Auburn University. Think about what Jacksonville State means to that area around Sand Mountain. Think about what University of West Alabama means to the Black Belt. Think about what University of North Alabama represents up in the Quad Cities and in the Shoals area. And think about the dramatic impact that both Alabama A&M University and University of Alabama Huntsville have on that economic engine that we have up there in Madison County and the surrounding counties. And then keep going. What do our HBCUs mean to our minority populations particularly, but also to the geographies where they're located? And you think about Troy and the Wiregrass and what an impact it has had. And then we have one of the most unique products in the country in having a public liberal arts school, the University of Montevallo, and what a unique niche that institution fills. And you just continue to go and look at all of our institutions and what they mean. It's pretty easy to see that if you took them out of the mix, you remove those public universities from Alabama, we would have a huge void. So Alabama's public universities have a $20 billion economic impact, the largest annual economic impact that the state contributes to on a regular basis. And speaking of state contributions, and this is what we'll come back to this, but just to give you another economic impact data point, we have a $12.50 return back to the state for every dollar that's invested in public universities. So why do we need a higher education partnership, and why do we need a group where you can give all 180,000 students a voice, where we can bring the 70,000 employees on our campuses together to have a voice, where we can link the messaging of our alumni? It's because without our universities, our state would dramatically would be impacted negatively in a dramatic way. And so we want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity wherever we can, whether it's with Chamber of Commerce groups, whether it is with civic organizations, whether it is in the airways of our TV and radio. We want to tell the story of Alabama's universities and how they make a difference. Now, one of the things that we also want to do, though, is recognize that universities make a difference in a bigger way than simply dollars and cents, which is huge, but they also make a difference in quality of life. Quality of life, and think about what we have in our state as a result of the contributions of our institutions. Now we're in the midst of a bizarre fall, and because we have never had a fall like this one when our number one, probably most favorite recreation in the state of Alabama has been impacted like it has, and that's our college football season. But think about just that simple little um, one isolated product. It's hard to describe college football in Alabama as simple and little. But think about how that impacts our state as a whole. Think about the conversations that are held around the water cooler. Think about the opportunities that you have to go and experience the campus environment. Think about all of the many ways that as cultural experience influences our state. Well, that may be the most prominent and the largest and most easily seen cultural influence, but also think about all the other programs that bring people to campus, that campus can then send people out from. Think about the opportunities that are created by the music departments on all of our campuses. We think about the prominent role of our marching bands and what they mean, but you also have to think about what we produce for the state when it comes to just vocal training and helping people learn how to take their passion for music and turn it into something that they can produce and can become a part of the fiber of our lives. Think about how Alabama has influenced the music industry across the nation, and how that we know we have a blessed group of people who have talent. How do we maximize those talents that we have within our population? So not only do universities make a difference as it comes to our economic output, but they also make a huge difference when it comes to just our everyday lives and how we enjoy living our lives. I'll tell you, one of the most interesting occurrences of the pandemic has been the frequency of our friends here in the central part of the state traveling to the lakes of Alabama. And we have 10% of the United States river systems flow through our state. You think about how the Tennessee River and the Tennessee Tom and the connectivity of that body of water, the Chattahoochee, the Alabama, the Coosa, the Tallapoosa, and on, the Black Warrior, the Warrior, all the different rivers and the ways that our hydroelectric programs have allowed us to have that recreation component. Think about how that has impacted our state as it relates to counties that wouldn't have other opportunities if we didn't have that blessing of that combination of natural resource and technology. Well, that combination of natural resource and technology does not just happen. Those are systems that are run by, that are organized by, that are designed by college educated and college trained individuals, whether it be the Corps of Engineering that works together with our departments of conservation and the departments of transportation to put together the systems that allow us to have the abilities to capitalize on those lakes, or whether it's the power companies and the others who help construct those dams that have allowed us to have the opportunity to have very affordable and easily accessible easily accessible electricity in our state, which having those utilities that we have creates opportunities for us economically. Again, just another example of how, if we didn't have the role of the university being played out effectively, how our state would be impacted. Quality of life, as well as ability to grow and prosper. Now, I talked about the parts of our state that are booming or that are doing well. And I talked about the fact that you have universities in them. You think about Jefferson County and the role of UAB and what a major player it is in our largest metro area in the state of Alabama. Think about the partnerships in and around the Tennessee Valley. Think about the expansive growth of industry and business and jobs coming out of the Huntsville area and spreading all the way down Highway 72 as you move towards 65 and even across 65 now. Think about how that is connected and the relationships, the interworking relationships that are so necessary for that type of economy to continue to thrive. Now, what a lot of you may not know about me, and it's a blessing that I've had, is that I have served as the mayor of Pike Road, Alabama for the last 16 years. Just honored to have been allowed the opportunity to start my 5th term. Now, the interesting thing about Pike Road is we are the eastern connecting city to Montgomery. We border the city of Montgomery, and we're the only other municipality in Montgomery County. Well, when we incorporated, we're one of the youngest, if not the youngest city or municipality in Alabama, and we incorporated in 1997. We had around 300 people. I was blessed to be offered the opportunity to be mayor when we had 300 people in 2004. Now we have over 10,000, and we've been the fastest growing city in Alabama for the last 2 decades. Now, what's fascinating about that, though, is that it's given me the opportunity to understand this job, this professional opportunity that I have to work with the universities in a real life context, because building a city and being a part of a group of people who have helped organize and put together and learn from their peers, and through some trial and error and some just wonderful blessing that having great experts around us, we've been able to put together all the fundamentals. But a lot of the things that we turn to, a lot of the resources that we turn to, a lot of the people that we turn to were university affiliated. And almost every single person that we turned to had a university degree of some form or fashion. So you think about how just in your lives, how many people you depend on every day to give you advice, to give you direction, to help you manage your affairs, whether it be your personal or your business affairs, that you depend on, that are graduates of one of our institutions of higher learning. Now, and one of the reasons I bring up Pike Road is because when you think about economic development, you think about the opportunities and what it takes to grow your economy in the modern era. So I don't know, I know that all of our cities, and particularly Gaston and your county where you're located there, you've got an interstate very, very accessible. You've got opportunities that are have been traditional businesses or industry that have been a part of your community for a long time. And then you also have the transition away from some of those traditional industries to trying to find new either manufacturing or other types of job providers. So think about that. Where do you go today? And who are you reaching out to create the jobs or to bring the jobs of tomorrow to your community? Well, one of the things that we're realizing is the digital age has truly created a significant level of importance for knowledge. Knowledge-based economy is really the direction that we're seeing most of our conversations moving. I was part of the River Region Defense Council conversation earlier this week, where leaders of Maxwell and Gunter Air Force Base were on the call. And if you know anything about Maxwell Air Force Base, it is the officer training ground for the entire United States Air Force. And we're very fortunate to have that in Alabama, and extremely fortunate to have it here in the River Region part of the state. Gunter is the computer center for the United States Air Force. So we have two vital parts of the United States military right here in our area. But to listen to them talk about what their expectations are for tomorrow, what is so necessary for their success in building and growing our nation's defense mechanisms, it is unbelievably tied to technology and our abilities as a nation to utilize and convert information into a useful resource. And if you think about that, the kinds of dialogue that they were having with us and what they're talking about needing and what we want to provide so that we can keep those vital parts of the United States military here in our economy and continue to help them be the best there in the world, what they're needing from us will require individuals with at least a 4-year degree, sometimes even master's degrees. And you think about all the different aspects right now of our daily lives, particularly in this pandemic, that are related directly to technology and how that technology is vital for our success. We have a lot of businesses, local businesses in our area, who have been able to maintain. We've had some that have struggled to maintain, and prayerfully we hope that those struggles end soon. But how have they been able to maintain? How has the local business found a way to continue to deliver a product in the midst of this pandemic? Well, because they've been able to communicate and connect with people in a unique way that allowed their product to still be displayed, allowed their transactions to continue to occur, they've been able to do that. Again, that is a technology-based, knowledge-based luxury that we all have that we cannot afford to take for granted. So sometimes we think about education, public education, and we think about it just from the perspective of, oh my goodness, we're struggling at our middle school, or we're struggling at our high school, and those struggles are real, and those opportunities to make improvements are real. But we cannot allow ourselves as a state, if we want to prosper in the economies of tomorrow and create the best potential opportunities for our residents and our citizens, we cannot allow ourselves to limit our analysis to simply one component of the comprehensive public education model. And that's, so the partnership's job is to travel around the state and make sure that people think about that. Make sure that we keep people in the, and keep this idea in the front of people's minds, is that when you define public education, when you think about public education, that you think about it all the way through each of those critical levels. Now, we've seen a lot of emphasis over the last decade on workforce training, and that is a component that in many times is immediately reference to Alabama's two-year schools and what we do in post-secondary. But we want to make sure that we don't fail to recognize the critical importance of our four-year institutions when it comes to workforce training. And sometimes I think we can be very quick to go to the immediate provider of a need, and not think about the next level or the next level that it's going to require to have a systematic solution to our concerns. Now, my hometown is Pineapple, Alabama. If you've ever driven from down the interstate and driven toward Mobile or to the beach, you've driven by Greenville's exit, and you'll see the sign that says Pineapple. It's two words, and Pineapple is a wonderful traditional Southern community with a very agrarian-based historic economy. With growing up in Pineapple, there was a feed mill. There's 2 or 3 timber-related industries that were there. There were lots of jobs that related to those timber industries. There were the local support industries, including the country stores and the pharmacies and the bank and all of that. We were kind of the eastern hub of activity in Wilcox County. Camden, the county seat, was the central hub, and then Pine Hill on the other side of the county, on the western side, was the western hub. Well, now if you go to Pineapple, there's one store, and there's very little other economic activity other than the traditional family agricultural or ag-based industries that have continued to survive. But if you want a loaf of bread or you want a gallon of milk, you've got a pretty significant drive to be able to go gather those products that you think about in many cases are just easily accessed in our society. The United States Department of Agriculture describes food deserts as places where we don't have the sustainable food product that we would think we would have in easy access to the populations. Well, if you think about Alabama, we have a lot of disparity between our hubs of economic activity and then our rural communities that are not very far really away from those hubs. And when I talk about hubs, I'm talking about our county seats, particularly in most of our 67 counties. So, how do we make sure that Alabama is preparing people in every part of our state for the opportunities that we need to be prepared for if we're going to continue to grow our economy? Well, clearly, and I commend Governor Ivey and her team and those that have been working in economic development for a long time in our state. We've done some great things. The automobile industry has been wonderful for us. We have a lot of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. We have opportunities that are occurring again in some the airline industry, for instance, right now is bringing us opportunity, and then a lot of the biotechnology, science-related industries in and around Birmingham are prospering. But when you go to my home county, you don't see all of that. We're still a pretty distant thought when it comes to that kind of economic growth. So what can we do, and how do we address so we don't have disparity, or so we elevate statewide, and why is that important? Well, one of the things I would bring to your attention is that Alabama right now, today, is in the 47th to 48th nationally ranked. It's 47th to 48th ranking nationally when it comes to per capita income. Now, what do we mean by per capita income? If you took the total income of our state and divided it out by the population, we would rank 47th or 48th in the country. Now, that statistic may not shock you, although it should be disappointing to all of us who are in any kind of role that helps to think about the future and the growth of our state. But 48th in the nation is dramatically impactful when you recognize that over 86% of the dollars that go into funding public education in Alabama are from sales and income tax. So if you're talking about creating opportunity and you're talking about creating possibilities for your state, then you have to think about what's going to be the motivation for a new generation industry to come to Alabama. Well, one of the things that we have to address is our abilities to provide the kind of training that's necessary for those next generation industries to come to our state. And if we're going to do that, we have to have the resources necessary. So it's cyclical. It's a very codependent process. We have to have the ability to grow our income, to create more discretionary dollars, to create more turnover in our economy through sales of goods, so that our sales and income tax related revenue goes up, so we can invest in all of public education. But one of our challenges is that we're not educating our population to a degree across the board that allows us to have the competitive advantage when it comes to recruiting those kind of jobs that pay higher salaries. In other words, in the competition level for new jobs, we've done well in generating jobs. But are we doing well in generating the jobs that will be the systemic improvement or the systematic improvement that we need for our economy to grow across the state? We have a population that is 24% where 24% of our workforce has a 4-year degree. Well, you may say, well, wow, that's pretty good. A quarter of our people have a 4-year degree, except for the fact that on average in the United States, the workforce has 30% of states' populations have a 4-year degree. So the workforce is significantly better prepared for opportunities that are to come in the new generation or next generation industry. So how can we adjust that? Well, one of the things we have to recognize is what are the factors that are contributing to our state's challenge as it relates to bringing more people to that level of having a bachelor's degree. What are our challenges to achieving those degrees, or what are our accessibility challenges? Well, one of the factors that creates a challenge is the cost of a 4-year degree. Now, we're not expensive compared to a lot of the neighbor states. Our 4-year degree programs are ranked consistently as great returns on investment, great values compared to a lot of the peer institutions around the country. But when you have a per capita income that's low, then the cost of tuition across the scope of our income means we consume more of our income for our college education than in other states. In other words, we may be affordable, but because we have less income, we consume more of it when we talk about people entering the 4-year degree arena. Well, how do we impact that? Some would say, well, universities can just stop raising tuition. Well, that's kind of like telling the chief operating officer at your business to stop thinking about what he needs for tomorrow. Stop thinking about how to be prepared for competition that's coming. You can't eliminate the resources necessary to be effective. You can't eliminate the resources necessary to have quality output. So what we have to do is we have to find alternative sources of revenue than tuition and fees. Well, in the model that we depend on in Alabama, because we don't have a lot of the historically companies that are historically rated in the Fortune 500 or those large scale industries, we depend on state dollars. Public universities are funded really with 3 sources, and sometimes people get confused. They think about our endowments or our foundations and say, well, why don't you use endowment money? Well, if our institutions are doing a great job raising endowment money, they're coming to people across the horizon and they're saying, hey, would you support this scholarship for social work? Or would you support this scholarship for agricultural science? Or would you support this professor in forestry or this professor in engineering or accounting or whatever it may be? Well, those dollars are then restricted by contract to those particular purposes. And so they can't be used for discretionary or typical operational needs. So when you think about public universities, we have three sources. You have your endowments or your private source dollars, but they are restricted dollars in most cases. So then you're left with two sources: tuition and fees and state contributions. And unfortunately, in Alabama, our level of state contributions has hovered around 26 to 27% of the total education trust fund is what has been contributed to our universities. Well, if the total education trust fund doesn't grow, then our revenue doesn't grow. And so the education trust fund has done well of late, but the education trust fund will only do as well as our economy lets us do, and it is directly related to our income level of our residents or our citizens. So if that income level doesn't go up, then our ability to generate revenue is negatively impacted, and therefore there's less dollars to contribute to the institutions, which means it's harder for tuition fees to be controlled. Now I know that's a long, kind of complicated thought process, but just think about this. If you're from a county that doesn't have a vibrant economy, what's going to allow you to be a great candidate to go off and get your degree and come back and make a difference in that county? So that's a simple question. What will allow you, or what will help you be that person? Well, in Alabama, a lot of times it's because you have a family business or a family that has provided resources, has been provided resources in some form or fashion that they're sufficiently able to fund your education. So it's a family-based support system. Otherwise, it might be a scholarship-based support system that you either gain through merit or through need. Well, scholarships, unfortunately, in Alabama, we don't have the great opportunities that the Hope Scholarship has created in Georgia and some of the other states. Bright Futures have created in Florida, where if you achieve a certain amount of educational success at the high school level, then you're automatically qualified. We don't have that revenue stream to provide those kinds of resources. And I'm not here advocating for the lottery. That is not my point. My point is that if we're going to have the ability to have those kind of dominant scholarship programs that a lot of our peers do, we have to come up with some creative ways to grow our revenue streams. And the best way to grow them is to grow them through increased economic activity. So if we can do that by encouraging more and more of our young people to strive to gain that four-year degree and be competitive on the merit-based side, then we're going to have a greater opportunity to achieve that end result that we want to achieve. It can be a very frustrating cycle if you think about it, because if you really break it down to what's going to allow our state to be as successful as possible, then you have to think about, why do we really want it to be as successful as possible? So, right now my parents are in their 80s, and my dad has pulmonary fibrosis. And so he's on oxygen, and his oxygen levels impact his heart rate, and it can be a scary thing. They live still in Pineapple. So for their medical care, they are 65 miles at minimum from anybody that can do something to help treat his condition. So if you think about the opportunities to improve quality of life and to bring in the kind of support systems that we need, we have to think about everything that influences the lives of our people throughout this state. Medical care is a huge issue, and how we're going to continue to provide that to our state as a whole is a huge issue. And we have to grow our economy and grow the things that will help us do that. And one of the critical components for that is what we do at our public universities. Think about how we are going to find unique niche markets for many of our counties. What will we provide those counties? What will those counties have that'll be available to provide additional jobs, additional opportunities for their residents. Well, one of the great blessings we have is the natural resources. And as we said earlier, we don't have a shortfall of water. We have great water systems. And so if we're going to turn our natural resources into product that we can utilize, then we need to we're going to have to educate our people on how to do that. And that's a role that both Alabama A&M and Auburn University provide great access to: your agriculture, your forestry, and your natural resource-based education. But if you don't have the resources necessary to get that information out to the community, then you're going to be struggling to help people believe that they can and should take on those challenges. And those are just two examples. Now, Alabama should be commended, and I'm sure many of you were involved in the exercise of helping pass the Rebuild Act to bring additional dollars to help improve our infrastructure. We're making great strides with infrastructure improvement. Again, we should be commended because we've done great things as it relates to the automobile industry and other targeted industry groups. But if we're going to elevate our state and we're going to truly reach some of the goals that we want to have, we can't just be hub by hub by hub successful. We have to find a way to reach into other areas of our state and bring that kind of opportunities forward. And the greatest asset we have beyond our natural resources are our people. And if we continue to make it more and more difficult for individuals to be able to have access to college, then that resource, that greatest strength we have, is the one that's going to suffer. We had two what we call advocacy workshops yesterday, where we did Zoom-related calls to two of our university campuses. We had over 100, right at 100 university students on those calls, talking about what are the issues that they see as critical to them as it relates to public policy. And one of the more interesting topics of discussion was where they're going to pursue their first job. And many of them are not looking to Alabama as their first landing point for their first job. And why is that? Well, a lot of that's because they don't feel the opportunity is as great here as it may be in some other location. It is not because they don't want to live here. They love Alabama across the board. Now, some are enticed by the bright lights and the excitement of a location, but for the most part, across the board, they want to be in Alabama. But what are we going to do to create the kind of formulas that our economic developers, our chambers of commerce can use to make that as an easy sell? And so universities are a critical part of that formula, of that success that we model that we must have in our state. Many of you know this if you're engaged in public education or if you're around your local schools, but a lot of our school systems at Alabama, we have over 130 school systems, are struggling right now to fill all of their vacancies for teachers. We have a teacher shortage in the state of Alabama. Why in the world would we have a teacher shortage? Again, it's not because we're not graduating teachers. It's because we have people who are being recruited other places who, frankly, don't see their opportunities as great here. So how do we address that? Well, it's not all about pay. Many times we're finding in the younger generation that it's not, pay is critical, but pay is a component of the mix. So as I talk to you today, I'll just some numbers to think about. The average person who has a 4-year degree over the course of their working lifetime will earn over $1 million more than a person that doesn't have a 4-year degree. Over the course of their working lifetime, that's $1 million greater return that comes to that person that is ultimately turned over multiple times in our economy. We have Georgetown University did a study that talked about where the jobs of opportunities are, and it's this beautiful graph that you can't see, but one of the things that I find interesting is that going all the way back to the 70s and coming into 2020 and beyond, we have seen a growth in job demand in the 4-year component or the need for 4-year degrees that has moved us into 24% of the jobs, 24% of the jobs out there are going to require at minimum a 4-year degree. That's the largest growth sector, and you can't really tell, but this is the growth trend pattern for 4-year degrees, growing more than any other. This purple that is here is declining. That is the growth pattern for individuals that have a high school diploma. High school diploma is certainly critical, and we want to have as many people as possible go through our school systems and achieve that goal. But high school diplomas and even 2-year degree achievement is not going to be, according to this Georgetown study that was completed last year, is not going to be enough to get us into the marketplace that can create the economic growth and economic opportunity that we want to have. Again, remember, 86% of the dollars that go into our education trust fund come from sales and income taxes. Now, in our little community of Pike Road, where we've grown so dramatically, we've grown in residential and housing, and so we've seen a lot of opportunities to gain revenue for our municipality through permits and the offshoot of construction-related income, construction-related spending. But we didn't really start with any retail. So going out and trying to recruit retail. And you think about retail, and for many of our cities across the state, retail has been the driving force for their success. Well, I spoke 2 months ago in Spanish Fort. The first, Cliff Davis, who's on the call, helps us with the partnership, does a great job of helping line up these kinds of presentations. And I spoke in Spanish Fort to the Kiwanis Club. First in-person meeting we had in a long time. It was great to be back out on the road. But we met at a restaurant there in the Spanish Fort Shopping Center. You guys know where Spanish Fort is. It's across the bay from Mobile, and it's right on I-10. And this shopping center has a Bass Pro and got all kinds of what you would say would be a traditional anchor store, something you want. But the restaurant across the street from that restaurant was a closed retailer. And just around the corner, another closed retailer. And just around the corner, another closed retailer. Joseph A. Banks, closed. Victoria's Secrets, closed. And thinking about that, so a lot of what we have traditionally done in our municipalities to try to grow our base of resources has been recruit retail. But retail is changing. And it's changing because we have become more accustomed to these tools, our phones, and our online ordering and the shipping of goods. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a different model. And it is a model that is going to change the way our communities look. It's going to change the way we think about our infrastructure. It's going to change the way the amount of dollars we have to invest in improvements in things like sewer and things like road systems and our public safety models, et cetera. It's also going to change the way we train our entry-level employees for their first jobs. Where are they going to go? And you think about, I grew up working on our family's farm and in my dad's country store. So I learned customer service, pumping gas and making deliveries from inside the store to the car, where people would just drive up and say, hey, can you go get this? And run in and get it, bring it out in a little brown bag, and that would be the way business was conducted in a lot of cases. Well, that taught me a lot. And you think about the lessons learned. Well, as retail begins to redefine itself, we're going to have a shift in many of our fundamental ways we think about growing our communities. And if we grow our communities, we can grow our state. But we have to find ways to do the things we need to do to increase our entrepreneurship, to increase our innovation, to increase our capacity of our citizens to compete in this digital market. It could be very easy for us to envision a marketplace where people live in their homes and are a part of a Fortune 500 company and never have to leave and travel. That very well could be the model that we're coming to in a decade. Well, then that means that those folks can locate in rural Alabama. They can, if we can get broadband, we can get the technologies we need, if we can have information sharing as prevalent as we now have electricity. But we've got to do the things we have to do to make sure that happens. And one of the critical components of our universities to make those things happen is the research, it's the background documentation, it's the understanding of the issues and providing solutions. And our solution-oriented thinkers tend to be those individuals who have gone through that model of training, who have had that opportunity to be experienced in that kind of thought process. So if we're going to address what we might define as challenges in the state of Alabama, we have to make sure that we invest in public universities. We have a state that has, unfortunately, traditionally ranked very high in the percentage of our population in poverty. And this is U.S. News and World Report study, but it shows that Alabama, right here with Mississippi and Arkansas, and Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, rank very high in the percentage of the population with poverty. Interestingly enough, so does Louisiana. We all pray for our friends down there who are going through this horrible weather-related event again. But you think about percentage of population in poverty. We have to address some of those issues because the poverty scale continues to impact everything we've talked about. So as a whole, I hope that I've been able to make the point effectively and not bored you with too much data and statistics, but to help you understand why we believe that it's critical that we engage your voice in the discussion of education, public education, being pre-K through PhD. So I talked about being from Pineapple and ending up in Pike Road, but my journey from Pineapple to Pike Road included a 4-year stop in Auburn. Now, when you come from a little school where you have 23 people in your graduating class and you decide you want to do something ambitious and you walk on the football team, which I had the privilege of doing, and you get out there and you're one of 70 walk-ons because it happened to be Coach Dye's second year at Auburn, and you look around and you see that there are people all over the place who are much more talented than you are and much come from a better background of coaching and experience. So you immediately have to make some decisions. Are you gonna stay with it, or are you gonna just roll over and say, no, I don't think this is for me? Well, in my case, I was taught a long time ago the value of persistence and perseverance. So I hung around and hung around and hung around and hung around. And 4 years later, I was blessed to have had the opportunity to be a part of a 50th Cotton Bowl experience, a 50th Sugar Bowl, a SEC championship, and watching Bo Jackson win the Heisman Trophy. That doesn't mean I'm special, not at all, because that's not the point. The point is that 4-year experience changed my life and created opportunities for me to think in a way that I would not have learned how to think without something similar in my pathway. So what can we do to motivate every single person in this state to believe in something, to pursue that something to the fullest of their ability, and have the opportunities that they can to chase that dream? That's really what this is all about. If you know a kid in kindergarten who is going to work their way up through the school system, don't you want that young person to think that by the time they get into the 2nd, 3rd, 4th grades and they're in elementary school, that they believe that making good grades is important, that they believe that achieving is important? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can provide them with a confidence and reinforce to them that if they'll do the little things they need to do, they can ultimately pursue a 4-year degree, which then opens the doors of opportunity for them in an enormous way. And I'll guarantee you, everybody on this discussion group this morning has had a life-changing experience, an opportunity to go through something that just completely opened your eyes to a new world. I know my great friend Brett Johnson. I'm so proud of Brett. He's just a wonderful young leader in our state, and Brett absolutely is a great example of that as a first-generation college graduate. And Brett, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but you have a great story of how your JSU experience opened your eyes, and you pursued it with great vigor and great energy. And I'm sure there are others on this call who've had similar experiences and opportunities. So I would just want to leave you with this. We have great universities, and we have great places for people to land. But if we're going to maximize our potential for all of Alabama, we've got to do the things we need to do to continue to make those as accessible as possible. And one of the things we must do is continue to fund our universities in a way that is equitable and provides the state contribution necessary for us to be all we can be. We're not asking for money to be moved out of K through 12 to be moved to the universities. We're not asking for money to be moved out of 2-year. But we do think that it is critical that when public policy makers think about education policy, that they think about it from a pre-K through PhD perspective. You never know how your life's going to be impacted by others. And I hope that the others that are impacting your life and impacting my life are as well trained for their level of responsibility as possible. I can tell you this, we have a 25-year-old daughter, my wife and I, sweet, special, God-given young lady. But she wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for UAB, because she had 2 holes in her heart and was missing a valve when she was 6 months old. She had open heart surgery, and 26 minutes after they took her into that operating room, she was out on a recovery table. I am so thankful every day of my life that we somewhere along the way said, we want a great medical school. We want a great opportunity to do things in our state. And we don't know exactly where that next important discovery is going to come from, but I do know that our universities are critical to making sure those happen. So thank you for your time. Heather, I know we wanted to have a little time for questions, so I'll stop with that. I am honored to have the privilege of doing this, and hopefully some of the things that I've had the opportunity to share with you have planted a seed, and that seed can help us grow. And it's a pleasure to serve the Higher Education Partnership. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gordon. I'm a data geek, so I really enjoyed that. I'm hopeful that maybe you could email me the Georgetown University bar graph. I could share it with everybody.
We have an entire set of slides, some of presentation called Facts and Reality, and I'll get Cliff to get them to him, and he can disperse those to you.
Wonderful. So we're going to open the floor. Does anyone have any questions? You can unmute yourself.
Gordon, my name is Jonathan Tang. I'm not an Alabama born. I'm a transplant. Went to Auburn University, so War Eagle.
I say War Eagle all behind you there.
Sorry for our Alabama fans. No, that's kind of the chicken and the egg argument that we have. Heather and I go around. Is one of the things is how do you recruit and keep your college graduates, your young people coming back? Gadsden. It's where my wife is from, so kind of like you said, entered into family business with my father-in-law. But when I got out of Auburn with a transportation and logistics degree, I was going to Atlanta. That's where you go
Sure.
if you want a degree. And so, kind of like you mentioned, with teacher shortage, my wife's a teacher. How do we recruit, teachers in the future? Because as you said, they're going to be retiring. They're going to be what makes, if you're a young person, and you're not already married, you're not coming to Gadsden. How are you going to find another, like you said, young professional here? So I guess you're right. That's a challenge we go back and forth with is what spurs that, that tipping point.
Yeah, I think it's not one thing, and that's what's frustrating. We'd like to say, okay, if we do this, or we do this and this and this, we solve the problem. But in reality, it's a combination of all of the above. But I kind of think that's one of the reasons why the university is such an important part of that, because universities are not one thing. I mean, what makes a university the wonderful experience could be what you learn in the classroom. But for most people, it's not just what you learn in the classroom, but it's the comprehensive experience. I have a degree in agricultural economics. I use the example of my football experience because that, to me, is a more dramatic illustration of how, your world can be changed by pursuing a passion. But I think that for all of our communities, and I put my mayor hat on here when I answer this question, I think we have to recognize, one, we've got to have great understanding of the generations that are out there and where they're going and what's influencing these generations. And for even, and I'm not a young guy anymore, but I'm not an antique either. So between, things have changed. I mean, the way people make decisions, the way people are influenced today has changed in my career. So how do we prepare ourselves to build the model that's attractive and then communicate that model in a way that allows people to see Gadsden as a destination? I think part of that is being able to create some of those exciting job opportunities that where they want to spend, because in reality, all of us spend a majority of our time at our work. As much as we might like to think work doesn't dominate our investment of time, it really does, and you can't avoid that. So I think that's where it's so important that we as a state, not just, and I don't mean this critically, I would never want this to be misunderstood, but not just be monolithic when it comes to jobs. All of us who have been in rural communities know that textile was vibrant in Alabama for many years, but now there are a lot of kudzu gathering, vines crawling on the brick wall buildings that used to be textile facilities, and so that's not an abnormal transition. It's a normal thing if you think about how society has progressed for thousands of years. But we have to be able to find the next group of industry. So is manufacturing everything we need to do? Personally, I think manufacturing is huge, but I don't think it's everything we need to do. We've got to find ways to be that niche community. So I would not want to try to say what that is for Etowah County, but I do think that we've got great professionals, you guys doing what you do, and great entities like our chambers and other places. I think we do have to know this, and I'll say this just this is a personal, almost editorial. I think we have to be careful not to lose sight of relationships. And I think we have to know that one of our greatest selling points is our heart, is our passion. And we have a very passionate group. Just check around tomorrow afternoon between 3 o'clock and 10 o'clock tomorrow night. You'll see passion all over the place. Well, when you think about that, getting to know the hearts of our people is a wonderful selling point. But we can't do that. That's what I miss. And Heather, you made this point earlier. I miss, by not being there, you guys getting to know me in a personal way. And on these kind of calls, we get to know each other through information sharing. But I can't wait. We're starting our Sunday school class back in church this Sunday. We've been back in the church for a couple of weeks now in worship services, and it's all different. We're all gonna be spread out on tables and all of that. But I'm so glad, because I miss getting to see the heart of people. That makes sense, and so I think it's not one thing, Jonathan. Unfortunately, it's a lot of things. Sorry, that was way too long of an answer. I'm supposed to be taking questions.
Well, we've got time for one more question if anybody else has anything.
Well, I'm honored again to have the privilege of doing these. And Brett, thank you for promoting the partnership, and Heather, for y'all being receptive to us doing this, and Cliff, for your continued hard work in arranging these options. And we are certainly available at higheredpartners.org, higheredpartners with an S.org. You can get on there and contact us. We've got a great staff, a bunch of young, energetic, enthusiastic folks here who really want to make a difference. We will be glad to have additional conversations with you. Come back, sit down with any group you have if you'd like to. We got a bunch of young leaders in the community you want us to visit with. We'll be glad to do whatever. But any way we can help, please let us know.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you for spending time with us today. Thanks everybody for joining us for the call today. And I know I took copious notes. We'll be sure to share that slide deck when we get it. And we just hope you all have a great Friday. Thanks so
God
much.
bless everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Thanks, Heather. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.